Yeah, first booking, it almost cost us money by the time of it. So we listed it on Airbnb. Within, I think, the first night of putting it on Airbnb, we got our booking for like that weekend.
So on like the Wednesday or something that you would have.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was crazy how quickly it all happened for us. And again, both working full time. I'd work on the Friday, Saturday. So anyway, that's what we did. We packed up, chucked everything in the garage pretty much and locked that up and separated it. We slept in the back of our car, man, on Hastings Point for the first night. It was very interesting. So we slept the first night, Hastings Point. I had to go to work the next day on Saturday to go and do I think it was 5 or 6 open homes. And then after that, I was just I'm not doing that again. So we ended up driving to Coffs Harbour and we stayed with Eden's mom for the night and then came back Sunday morning early. Yeah, just literally had to start all over again, unpack the garage, clean the house again and get ready for work on Monday.
Welcome to More Than Money with your host, Ross Marais. This episode of More Than Money is brought to you by More Time Financial, a financial planning company who are on a mission to help young Australians make smarter decisions with money by providing real-life financial advice, coaching and financial education.
Hello, it's your host, Ross Marais. Welcome to More Than Money. This is a podcast for people who like to do things a little bit differently. Those who aren't willing to settle for normal or what society expects of them. On this podcast, I have real conversations about lifestyle, money, and business. Sometimes I share financial education and informational episodes to help you make smarter decisions with money, as well as guest interviews with young business owners and young entrepreneurs just like this episode today. So if you're new here, please consider subscribing. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Firstly, for the regular listeners of the show, I need to apologize for the gap in between this episode and the last episode. It's something that I've been working on with my team, and I am pleased to say that we will be back to our weekly schedule from this week's episode onwards. So very excited for that. So stay tuned for some awesome episodes coming up. In today's episode, I have a guest interview, which I'm very excited about. Craig Hill from Howzit Management, who, as you'll hear on this episode, owns and operates an Airbnb management business, as well as 2 successful Airbnb properties on the northern coast of New South Wales. The story of how Craig and his partner Eden got started with their own Airbnb journey and now turn it into a successful business is one that I knew I had to share, and something that I feel a lot of people are going to get value out of. Throughout this episode, we discuss some of the lessons that he has learnt in running his own Airbnb property, as well as how he's able to take this passion for property that he has and turn it into the business that he has today, which is Howzit Property Management. We also discuss some of the tips and tricks that you need to know if running an Airbnb or owning an Airbnb property is something that you're interested in. Some of the little things that you need to know, such as taking great photography, the importance of having a super clean property, as well as the importance of reviews and customer service. So stay tuned for this week's episode with Craig Hill from Howzit Property Management. Kick things off, when someone asks you what you do for work or what you do for a living, what do you tell them?
Pretty much straightforward. I have a rental role of holiday accommodation, boutique holiday accommodation. We try and aim for the higher end of the market. So boutique is the key word there, I think.
Yeah. And do you tell them that exclusively on Airbnb?
It's quite an interesting, so that's quite a common question actually. A lot of people do ask that. We do use solely Airbnb, and there's a number of reasons, but the main one being is they handle all transactions. So there's no overheads for us. So we're able to keep our fees lower, not having to have trust accounting and all the rest of it involved, where Airbnb have an accounting system in place that owners and myself we create our payment splits. So I had a percentage, and then when those bookings come in, those payments just go to the designated accounts at the designated split. So that's one of the main reasons. It really simplifies it for me. And then it also keeps my costs down from that end. So it allows me to be a little bit more competitive with my pricing. The second of all is the demographic and the target market that Airbnb attract. It allows us to screen our guests, so we're making sure we're getting the right clientele into the right property, where it's not just an instant book where you would, per se, if you wanted to book a hotel on booking.com, you can book it instantly regardless the way we do it, at least we get to screen who comes in and how many people, if they're going to abide by our rules. They have a review system in place. So all those little things that Airbnb contribute makes it an easier process for us.
So obviously we've known each other, not really sure how long now, but a couple of years. I think it'd be really interesting to know a bit of your backgrounds, how this all kind of got started. So what were you doing? Obviously, hopefully everyone picks up the accent that you were born in South Africa. So what, like maybe just a summary, but what's been your kind of your resume or your work history since?
All right. Well, look, I don't know how far back you want to go, but I guess just in a nutshell, for me, when I left school, academics was never really my strong suit. It wasn't something that I went and studied for a year. I didn't get very far. So from early on, I had to maybe look at other options for myself. So that's when I went and I ended up becoming a dive instructor. Dive instructor led me into working on boats all over the world, really. I used it to travel, essentially. Yeah. That's when I got onto working on private islands in the Seychelles. From the Seychelles, a big luxury super yacht sailed in. I had a couple of mates on there. They were looking for a dive instructor. I jumped on board from there pretty much. That's where I met Eden, my wife, who's Australian. And we did probably about 6 years together on the super yachts, which was great. Like it was always a means to an end for me, but it put us in a position. So when we did get to Australia, we were, I suppose, financially more set up than possibly that we would have been if we were slogging away here in Australia. It means for us that we just had that deposit for our property, for example.
And how old were you when you guys finished up on the yachts?
I would have been 31. So yeah, but I started quite late in comparison to a lot of other people. That's why I think I didn't last as long. A lot of guys younger than me on the boats were in charge of stuff. So I didn't, where I'd come from a management role, but I struggled with taking orders from a 25-year-old being 30 for a little bit.
Naturally, yeah.
Yeah, and I refused to, again, study in the yachting industry. People expect you get a job, but you progress through the boat by doing courses and such. And again, I try to avoid that as much as I can. It's just never been something I enjoy doing, studying, unless it's something I find interesting. That kind of led to us then landing here in Australia about 5 years ago.
And just jumping back to the boats,
yeah,
I feel like, and we spoke about this before, but that being a bit more intentional about the reason you were there. Whereas I feel like maybe it was the age thing that a lot of younger people go on these boats and live it up, make good money, but then obviously blow it all.
Oh, look, definitely. Look, I think it is. I won't lie. Like our first year on board one of the boats when we resigned, and I took everything I'd earned in that year and traveled Thailand and Bali for 9 months. And yeah, it gave me that opportunity at 26 to do that and not have a care in the world. It was great. It was fantastic. But then, yeah, you do start to realize that. And unfortunately, I think it's quite a common thing in the industry on yachting is guys realize it a little bit too late. And if you don't need 12 pairs of sunglasses. And I know that sounds silly, but that's what people do. Right? Yeah. All the materialistic things that people buy, like I did. And you soon realize when, that horizon starts coming where you're like, geez, I'm going to be setting up shop. There's no more. There's a mortgage, there's rent, there's car repayment. Then you just, generally people bank like the last 2 years where they could have been banking the last 7. So that's generally in a nutshell, I guess, though not everyone's like that, but I do see it quite a lot.
So then, yeah, you arrived in Australia, and did you guys have a bit of an idea or plan of what you were going to do?
Look, I suppose also we were fairly lucky. Eden, obviously being a school teacher, fell straight into work as soon as we landed. So that made life easier for me. It wasn't necessarily it was still tough, but it gave me options to take time to find out what exactly it was that I wanted to do. So when I first landed I was working back on boats, polishing boats, for next to nothing, driving an hour up to Coomera. And but it was a means to an end. It was for just waiting for me to find something like a foot in the door and what I wanted to do. And that was obviously real estate for me was the game that I was very interested in and have been interested in for a long time. And so while I was sitting, that was then again the first time I've actually sat down and studied to try and get something was when I had to, and that was to get my real estate license.
So how long did you end up? I was trying to think about this, but how long were you a real estate agent for?
So I did it for 2 years. So I got taken on by an agency as the principals. They call me like the selling agent, really. So I wasn't really in charge of trying to list property. I was just selling his listings that he was listing, obviously, and that was my job for the first year. And then I wanted to. So I approached him in that time too, and I was like, look, I want to go on my own. I don't want to just be on riding your tailcoats. So that's what I progressed into, and I did my own thing within the agency for the next year. And
was that like moving to be like the primary agent?
Yeah, so it was still working under the actual banner of the agency, but just listing and selling my own properties as opposed to just selling his. It was just, for me, it was a no-brainer. I didn't want to just be riding someone's tailcoats. It's just a progression thing, and that's what I wanted to do. And that's when, while we were doing all of that, is actually when we first realized this. So we had just bought our first place. Obviously, that's a big thing for me when we landed in Australia. We wanted to buy a property almost straight away.
Yeah.
But it proves to be difficult. The banks and lending criteria around all of that, we had to wait quite a bit. We both all needed to be permanently employed. I had no credit history or anything like that here in Australia. So it was a waiting game. And then luckily, within 6 months, we had our foot in the door, and that's when we bought our first property, which is, I suppose, has been the catalyst for the rest of everything. And that's where it all started for us, really. It was...
the first property being the Cabot Cottage.
Cabot Cottage.
What now is the Cabot Cottage, obviously.
Which is, that's right. So it was that. So that's where I suppose the whole Airbnb journey started for us. We bought this place. It must have been March 2016, I think it was, when we settled and finally got the keys for it. And it wasn't anything pretty by any stretch, but it's what we could afford, or what we thought we could afford at that time. Yeah, so then we started getting stuck into it, and we started renovating it. And
I was going to say, when you were like first looking at that, what was your experience with Airbnb? So that was 2016. Like, I'm not sure exactly when Airbnb started.
Pretty much zero, nothing. Maybe I'd used the platform once or twice to book accommodation while traveling and overseas and that, but from a hosting perspective, nothing. Had never seen the back end of Airbnb from a host at all. So that was pretty much the start of it, really. But so that was pretty much the starting point for us on Airbnb.
And so obviously when you guys bought that place, that the Cabot Cottage now is, did you ever think about Airbnb in it, or was it just you're buying it to live in it? Like, I was just going to...
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it was a place that, to be honest, if you had asked me 5 years ago when we bought it, if this is what it would have been, I would have called you a liar for sure. There's no ways that was the expectation into it. It's just snowballed, for lack of a better word, on how it's all progressed. Obviously I suppose how it actually all really started was that we had invested every cent we had into buying this place.
Yeah.
And then we were spending even more of that renovating it. And this is when reality kicked in. We were working 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, Saturdays, and we wanted to recoup some of our investment all that money that we had put into the place. So it was a matter of listing it on Airbnb and trying to recoup and try and get a little bit of that money back.
Do you remember the first booking you guys got?
Yeah, man, it's pretty tough to forget. We must have, I couldn't tell you how long we had. Yeah, first booking, we pretty much, I think it almost cost us money by the time of it. The idea was so we listed it on Airbnb. Within, I think, the first night of putting it on Airbnb, we got our booking for like that weekend.
So on like the Wednesday or something that you would have...
Yeah, exactly. Like, it was crazy how quickly it all happened for us. And again, both working full time. I'd work on the Friday, Saturday. So anyway, that's what we did. We packed up, chucked everything in the garage pretty much, and locked that up and separated it. We slept in the back of our car, man, on Hastings Point for the first night. And it was very interesting. So we slept the first night at Hastings Point. I had to go to work the next day on Saturday to go and do I think it was 5 or 6 open homes. And then after that, I was just like, I'm not doing that again. So we ended up driving to Coffs Harbour, and we stayed with Eden's mom for the night, and then came back Sunday morning early. yeah, just literally had to start all over again, like unpack the garage, clean the house again, and get ready for work on Monday. But yeah, like it was very interesting, the first one. It was a bit crazy looking back at it now.
Like obviously back then, and probably you'd know more about it than me, but even where you're located, the Cabot Cottage, like there's not that many places on, like obviously a lot more now, but 2016 would have been next to nothing.
Oh, that's it. And that's why we were lucky. We didn't quite know what we had stumbled on. It was very few and far between places that were on Airbnb, maybe a couple. But we couldn't believe how quickly this was just shooting off at us. So that led to increasing our nightly tariff slightly. So like, we've only been getting 200 or like maybe I think it was like $150 a night then. And we're like, all right, let's see if we can keep pushing the boundaries and pushing the limit on how much we can earn. And we started getting that. And then on that same time, I don't know, man, we were crazy then. We decided to start another little business on the side too. So we imported Nguni hides from Africa.
So and just for non-African people, just those are like rugs, like
exactly. Sorry, probably so cow hides, really rugs.
Yeah.
And so we had that going on the sideline, and it was just a crazy time, man. So like we started getting really good pricings for weekends, but we were still working full time. So it got to a point
at that stage you were just listing on weekends. Like obviously you're still living in the house.
Yeah, that's right. So it was listing. It's still just on weekends. So Friday and a Saturday night, guests leaving on the Sunday. And then, so like I was rushing off to pack the car up on Friday before 2 p.m. as a check-in, chucking all these Nguni hides. And then we were going off to the markets on Saturday. And I was then going to open homes, and Eden was sitting doing the Ngunis at the markets. And then pitching, like we were pinching a tent up in like campsites, just and living out of a tent for, I can't remember how long we did tents for, but it got crazy. It was nuts.
I think that was the first time that we were chatting about it. That's what perked my interest, because you said, I think at that time you were paying like $30 a night or something for the campground, and you were renting out the unit for what, $200 or $250 a night or something. So
it started getting it nice and worthwhile for us. Like we were starting to maybe make $500, $600 at that time within the first year for a weekend. You know, I had a $30 campsite, probably a $50 tent in the car, and it just kind of worked. But everything that's what I'll go back to, how everything progressed and snowballed for us. We started doing pretty good. So we were like, we went from living in the car to a tent. So we went and bought a caravan. We were like, next progression.
Yeah.
We'll go to, we went and got a caravan. And then from the caravan, I guess that progressed to maybe a year and a half later, we found that we had enough equity in there, and we went and bought another place in Kingscliff.
That's awesome.
It's all just how it's progressed and snowballed, and now that is now solely run as a full-time holiday rental.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
absolutely. As you said, like looking back 4 years ago, if someone had said this is what's going to happen,
it's
mental.
Yeah. So look, like again, from that we run it now, like almost runs like probably like a 60 to 70% occupancy rate. That's that's nice and strong from our side. But I suppose how then we rolled onto the business was, I was in real estate at that time still, and in the banner that I was under, what I was working under, they had a holiday portfolio, and I couldn't believe, like some of these, they had like 300 odd properties on their books, and they'd never seen them, or it was just odd. So there wasn't really, like, that's the old traditional way of holiday letting. And then there was just, I just thought there was a bit of a gap in fine tuning that, and like making it a little bit more boutique and hands-on. And people approached us in the area, like, and were like, we wanting to do it. Like, can you give us some pointers, advice? And so that kind of really is where Howzit Management started from that. And it just kept growing.
So before that, you moved into that, as you said, you were working full time as a real estate agent, probably more than full in normal 9 to 5 cents. Eden was working as a full time school teacher. You had the cottage that you're renting on the weekends, and you're still selling the cow hides.
The cow hides fell aside pretty quickly when we started realizing, like, well, I suppose for us it's work hard. We'll work smart, not hard. What we're having to do for those hides was time consuming, as opposed to what we were generating on Cabot Cottage was a no-brainer. So that kind of just fizzled out to the side, recouped what we needed to pay ourselves back for that.
Yeah.
And then we just ran with Cabot Cottage pretty much.
Like, I think there's a few elements to that as well of, yeah, you had a nice place, you're in the right spot, there's not much competition, but I think on top of that, the amount of hard work that went into it, whereas you tell most people like, hey, pack up everything, go camping for 2 nights and rent out your house. I assume that 99% of people wouldn't do that. So like, nah, that's too much effort. I don't want to clean the house. I don't want strangers coming into my house. Obviously, yeah, the hard work you guys have put into it is.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that is the perception. Some people do have the perception that Airbnb is easy money. And look, I suppose it is easy money because you're not really doing anything for it at the time that you're earning the money. But the preparation leading into it and probably the discomfort that you might have to go through while they're there. Yeah, it can be. And it's a lot of work and it's a lot of pressure because it's a funny thing. Like when you do your Airbnb, you open yourself up to a bit of people reviewing your property and it's not clean enough or the beds weren't soft enough. So it's all those little things that, especially when you've put all that time and effort into making it look nice, it's pretty easy for someone to just take the wind out of your sails. And that's where I think a lot of people will give it a go and then they generally phase out because it just becomes a little bit too much work. And I suppose that's again where we can step in and help that process really.
And with just back on your place, when you were renovating it all, was that you're renovating with the intention of being able to rent it out, or was it still just purely to make it nice for you guys to live there?
It was nice for us. It was. Look, I mean, we did a lot of cosmetic stuff, but then we were like, cool, we're comfortable with this now. Like, we're happy. This is good. And then it rolled on to like, almost like a 2-year project. So we started making a bit of money on it. We're like, oh, maybe we should render it. Oh, you had that little bit of extra cash, so we rendered it. All right, well, what about the bathroom? All right, let's change the bathroom up a little bit. So it allowed us that freedom, whereas opposed if we weren't doing that, it probably not much of it would have changed, I think, I don't know. But yeah, it gave us that little bit of cash injection to do those little things that we probably wouldn't have.
And was there like a light bulb moment that you realized that, holy shit, we're actually making some decent money, or we can potentially make some decent money off this thing?
Yeah, definitely. Look, it wasn't too long ago, to be honest. Like because it only really became a full-time rental, October 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
Which was a scary step because now you all of a sudden you've got another mortgage that you need to pay too. So this needs to be making you money. But I think we lucked out. We got it quite right. Like we knew when our settlement period was going to be on our next place. So it gave us like a 2-month window to try and fill that calendar up as much as possible 2 months out. So from the day we moved out, it was generating us income.
Yeah.
And then, that was pretty much that light bulb moment where we started looking, where we were just capitalizing on weekends when you didn't really realize how much more there was even just during the week. So we were just like, okay, this potentially and it's a third income, really.
Yeah. So you moved out of there and moved into what's now the beach flat. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Yeah. So the beach flat it was bought. So that it's a unit in Kingscliff. It was bought purely for, well, we saw a few little things going on in Kingy. Number one, obviously being the hospital being built here. So it was a massive, it was just a calling card for us. So as soon as we saw something in our price range, we jumped on it. And it was going to initially be just a flip. So we were going to buy, renovate it, and try and just put it back on the market within a year. But again, like that, those Airbnb hooks just started getting into us. And we were like, all right, so here we go. Let's start again. On weekends, we'll start moving out again.
Into the caravan this time?
So now we had the caravan, which is good, but we didn't really do it like we did last time with Cabo. It was more so around when we wanted it. So it wasn't like we needed it, or it was like, well, we're going away this weekend. Let's put it on. If we get something, great. If not, we move away. It's all good. But by this time, I've also had Howzit was established.
Okay.
I had everything in place like that. So we had the cleaning teams and everything. So it made it a lot easier for sure.
When did Howzit started?
Howzit was pretty much January 2 years ago. No, so not, yeah, so two and a bit years ago, Howzit launched, but it wasn't by any stretch like successful for probably the first 6 months, to be fair. So again, that goes back to obviously like credit to Eden. She was keeping us afloat pretty much. And we were lucky enough, we also had Cabba, which was still generating an income. So from that side, for me to open a business, it was a little bit easier of a decision than knowing that we still had and coming in from two different avenues. And it did then take a little bit longer for the business to get going, which relieved pressure for me at least anyway.
Definitely. And was it a decision of, okay, I'm going to quit being a real estate agent and start the business, or did you phase out and phase in?
I think it got a point to me. It got to a point for me where I wanted to work for myself. I wasn't in any sort of, it wasn't like a decision that I was like, okay, I'm just done. I'm going to do that. I'm just going to go and do it. I was like, I'm done with work. I'm done working for someone else. What can I do? And it was there. It was presenting itself, but I just needed to run with it. Yeah, there were times obviously in the first 6 months, I was just like, oh, maybe I should be going back to real estate, but we slugged it through and we pushed through and it was okay. Worked out.
And people were like, obviously the opportunity, you said you saw it from the rent roll that you were working as a real estate agent. You saw the holiday rent roll.
Yeah.
And what could be done there. You said you saw the opportunity, and then you said people were approaching you in the area. Obviously you guys were getting a bit of a following on Instagram and stuff. And so were people coming to you and asking you how you were doing it? Yeah.
So I suppose, look, there was a number of few ways that we marketed it so that we could try and attract the right clientele. So it wasn't necessarily just trying to get any property on the books. So people were reaching out, but we still might have not felt that it was a good fit for us. So it more just came from, believe it or not, it was quite generic. It actually just rolled on. And like, we did have that sort of social media. It's not that we have a huge following on it, but around Cabba Cottage. And then, so we used that as a channel.
Yeah.
And people locally were following that. I think, triggered an idea going, oh, hang on, here's someone who might be able to help us maybe generate a bit of income on ours. So that helped for us getting our clientele.
And did you have it sounds like you did, in terms of the properties you were looking for, that was obviously a decision you made rather than just bringing on anyone and everyone.
Yeah.
And obviously looking at the portfolio you've got now, it's a certain type of clientele, as you said, a certain type of property. It's the bit of the higher end, the boutique-y.
Yeah. Look, we've tried, I suppose, we've also found it, and it's changed slightly over the 2 years that we've been doing it, because there's a property for everyone. So it's not necessarily that we only boutique, I suppose. It's more yes, we do have high-end property, absolutely, but it's more of the management around any particular property. Any particular property, I feel, can be boutique if you do it the right way. So it's not necessarily that you have to have $1 million home to be a boutique property. It's just more the fundamentals and what you get right within your property that you have. Like our place at Cabba is, you can't swing a cat in it. It's tiny, but it's just the smaller things that we've been able to incorporate into it that people would then consider it a boutique property. And that's just your furnishings, your higher end linen, just little things like that make it more comfortable for your guests.
And where do you think that, and this might be Eden, I'm not sure, but that kind of that eye for detail and the decorative side of things come from? Was that?
Yeah, look, I can't take credit.
You can't take credit.
That's definitely Edo. She's got an incredible eye for it. And I think it's just something that's really come naturally to her. And I would think, like, in all honesty, if she wanted to give up teaching, it's something that she could really channel into. And people ask her all the time for it, my clients included. So it's a service we offer that we don't charge for, but Eden will come and style up a place for photos and stuff like that. So it's definitely, it's a gift, I suppose. I can't do it, man. It's a tough one, but she's definitely got a very good eye for it. So it makes it easier.
In that first 6 months, you said there was obviously some ups and downs. What were some of those biggest kind of challenges or roadblocks?
For me, it was, I suppose, just sitting around and actually not knowing what to do a lot of the time. Like, I'd come out of real estate where I was flat out pretty much 6 days a week. And I literally had the one day to myself to start saying, I've started this business. work on the website for 2 hours or whatever it is, go and do a letterbox drop for another hour. And then by lunchtime I was done and I was like, well, what do you do next? What's the next sort of step? Because there's no like handbook for it. It's
especially something like this, as we were saying, like Airbnb didn't exist. Like this wasn't a job. This isn't a job. Like it's not.
Yeah. So it was frustrating on that side because I was like, wow, I suppose I was lucky that we had our own place, and that kind of kept me busy because I wasn't employing cleaners or anyone at that time. I was just literally going in and I was doing the cleans myself. And then I got a lucky break. Like someone found out and they asked us, can I help them? I was like, yes, absolutely. So then once that momentum started like coming, it became easier, but I kept myself, even when we had 3 properties on the books, it was still fairly quiet. Like I still needed to occupy time. So that was the biggest I found for myself. And then all kinds of things start racing through your head when you got time, man. It's horrible. So I try to keep myself busy, I guess. That was probably the biggest thing. But like I said, I did that without employing anyone. I was just literally just doing everything myself.
I suppose that's another interesting point to look at it, that the fact that you're taking the book into your cleaning, I assume, like changing the sheet.
Yeah. I was doing the linen, everything, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that you had Cabba Cottage for 2 years prior, you saw what was involved, saw like the customer service side, you styled the property, like everything. So you knew it back to front, I assume, like everything.
Yeah, look, I honestly I can say that now. I reckon it's probably been the best thing that I had done, probably establishing the business, is knowing the business from the ground up. And I suppose any business owner does, because at some point they got to start, like it would be the same across the board. But that was the best thing for me, because now that if I've got employees and like doing those things, it makes it easier for me to go and check those things. And the same thing as like an employee that's worked their way up really nicely with me. She's the same thing, started at the same level where she was cleaning all the properties, doing the linen, and now she's managing stuff. So it's a very fundamental thing for me that like anyone that needs to start, learn the bottom and you work your way up, and it just makes it that much easier for sure.
Started off with just Cabba Cottage and then obviously doing the beach flat as well on the weekends. Yeah. And then has it just literally been one property at a time?
Look, I think word got out, especially in our area around Cabarita Beach, Kingscliff, Pottsville, Casuarina. It didn't take long for people to find out what people could be generating, especially through that Christmas period. But no, not really. Once we got 1 or 2, it really started flowing and the business really started moving quite quickly. In saying that, like, yeah, the business was moving quickly, but it still takes, like, every time I set up potentially an Airbnb property, it's like starting a new business all over again, really. Like, that property needs to get its reviews, needs to start getting the people through it. So it all takes a bit of time. So we were getting all these listings coming on, but it still takes like a 2-month window before those properties really start getting busy. That was also another sort of tricky bit. So like, yeah, I was busy and I was working hard at that point, but I still wasn't really seeing any income on it. It was only really after the first maybe year that we saw the real potential on what it could be doing.
And was it people that were renting their place on holiday rentals or through, like, as you said, the previous real estate agent you're working for, like doing something like that? Or these people that were brand new to it, never rented the house ever?
There was a mixed bag. There were a few that came from other agencies, yes, that were maybe looking just for a more hands-on kind of management style. And then there were a few that were maybe had just purchased. We obviously saw that massive influx of Sydney and Melbourne buyers that were starting to purchase up this way. They want to use it as a holiday rental for themselves, but they don't want to put obviously a full-time tenant in. So they want to use it in the December periods, whenever it was. So when that sort of influx came, that's when I reached out and I started getting quite a lot of referral-based business from local real estate agents that don't have a portfolio, that aren't interested really in looking and doing what I do. Yeah. And so I got a nice referral basis from that. And then that kind of also just like rolled on and just kicked it up a bit too. So it was good.
How does it work from your side? How do you explain it to people exactly what you do for those types of clients or for your clients?
Look, it's pretty much like we try and not overcomplicate it. Like My idea is behind the whole business is that it would be every property, every owner is going to have different wants, different needs. It's a different situation. So we got to try as a business rather be flexible to accommodate them. And look, it's in fairness, like we're not always going to be the best match for someone, and that's okay. And I've come to terms with that. From the perspective of what we tell them and what we do for them is like, I think it's the biggest thing for us is what we do is that we look after their property as it's ours. We want them to feel confident that it is looked after extremely well. If there isn't any bookings in there for a week or 2 weeks, we still go into the property and we're making sure that, it's nothing's going on. It's not burning down or whatever it is. But so that's I suppose our point of difference and how we like to do it.
And obviously, as you said, with the rental role, that's completely different to just having 300, 500 listings on a rent roll. Yeah, look,
you could easily, I suppose not say easy, but we don't really want to be that big. It's not really what we are. You don't want to lose, and it's also like we get requests to go up the Gold Coast way and that, but you just tend to lose touch with the property, I feel. And I'd rather just stay locally to the business where I can get to it or my manager can get to it within a quick time frame. And you don't want to lose that. I'll say it's quality control. And that's what I don't want to lose control of at all. Like you want to make sure that property is bang every single time.
What's been some of the other like big lessons you've learned? One, starting the business, and then obviously working for yourself for the very first time.
Jeez, look, I think like working for yourself, as you will know, man, it's pretty stressful. It's pretty tough.
Yeah.
There's some pretty massive ups and downs and peaks and troughs. But I think like if you can, for me, probably my biggest lesson out of working for myself is knowing my value and making sure that, you don't sell yourself short, man. Like your time is money and or not money, but it's valuable. Yeah. Right? And so know your value and don't let anyone else tell you different. And that's something that I've learned and have it to become a little bit harder with clients. And that is, we're not going to give our service away. As much as we want to help you, we are a business and we do a good job. It's just, we know your value, man, for sure.
I think that's a really big one. It's something that I see, and obviously something I struggle with as well, is because I've been doing what I've been doing for so long. For me, it'll take 5 minutes to find the answer. Whereas for someone else, it'll take them 2 hours. So I see it on the creative side a lot. So I deal with a lot of creative clients and they just, it's just a drawing. Like it might take me 2 minutes to mock up a logo and they don't put a value on it. Whereas for someone else, their client coming in, it's like they would have taken 2 weeks to design that or think about that or worry about that.
Yeah, exactly.
When you know something and as you said, like your value, you've been doing Airbnb for like 4 years, 5 years, however long it's been.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it'd be easy to be like, oh, cool, just do this. It's easy for you, but it's hard. It is a hard one to try and put value on that.
It is because a lot of people will say that and they'll probably go like, it only took you 2 minutes. How can you justify charging me what that is? But I'm able to do that because I've been doing it for 5 years and that's the difference, man.
It's taken me five years to do it in 2 minutes.
Exactly. Sorry, I dropped out. There you go. Yeah, it is, man. That's it. Like, so it was a big learning curve for me and it's got to a point now where it is like where I know my value. And if someone isn't going to appreciate that, maybe we're not the best fit.
And how about on the financial side of the business? Has that been a pretty steep learning curve of getting head around that?
Yeah, man, definitely. Look, it's still learning. It's for me, it's an ongoing thing. I've always wanted to try and make it better and do better with it. So it's definitely something that's like an ongoing, I wouldn't say struggle, but you can make it easier for yourself, I guess, by reaching out. And it's exactly like I look at my clientele. The clientele come to me because they trust that I know what I'm doing. That's how I look at it from the financial side. I'd rather outsource it. At least I know that it's going to be done properly. And like I have reached out and I've done a lot of research and work around it and that. So look, it's always a bit of an ongoing sort of struggle, I suppose, from my side, but definitely a big learning curve.
Yeah, I see it with obviously clients all the time. And I always say to people, there's no test or no requirements to start a business. You go online, you register for ASIC, you get an ABN, and you can start invoicing clients the next day.
Yeah.
And it just seems crazy because all these, it's so easy to start, but then it's not till like 12 months later where you do your first tax return that all these problems start to come up. And the Australian system's so complex.
Look, we did it. We learned a pretty steep, hard lesson on the first year. Like, there's no two ways about it. Like, especially, look, one of our biggest problems are we wanting to obviously keep growing our personal portfolio, but then first tax return comes in, man. Like, all of a sudden, banks aren't looking at me anymore. They don't want anything to do with me because I'm a startup business. And I thought I was smart writing everything off to tax, but it didn't really work out that well for me. So we've had to delay another year. So like, that was probably one of the hardest lessons we've learned, because now the market's gone up that much too. So you're like, oh, bloody hell. But yeah, it's the financial side of it for me is, rather get someone who can definitely help. It makes things a lot easier for sure.
Yeah, it's another level of complexity that gets added when you're self-employed, especially if it's
definitely
like in your case, it's you and then Eden's working. But when there's two people self-employed, as you said, trying to get finance to buy a property, all those things just become that so much harder because the banks just have a few more rules.
Yeah, and to me, it doesn't even really stop there. Like, even transitioning now into where the business is going, it's having employees and like all that kind of stuff, like super paying their tax. Like, it's, I reckon, and I don't know, I could be wrong, like I've avoided doing it just purely because I don't know it and I don't understand it. It's like that, it takes time, so it's complicated, and so it just does it. Yeah, man, it's way easier to just rather outsource what you don't know.
That's obviously another thing of being the business owner, is wearing those multiple hats. Like you said, previously you're doing it all yourself, and then you transition to where, you get to a point you can maybe start hiring other people, but then you have to manage those people.
Exactly. So then there's like a whole nother, it's like another whole level to it. So it's, mate, that's on your own business, I think, though. Like, there's peaks and troughs and there's really tough times, and it's always sounds nice. Like, oh, we went for a surf at 10. Yeah, but on a Wednesday, but man, I was up all Sunday slugging it out too. So it's, it has its perks, but it's something you have to think hard about before you dive into it, for sure.
Well, that was going to be my next question, is that the work-life balance. Have you hit the nail on the head there, or is it still a work in progress?
Yeah, it's always going to be a kind of work in progress, I feel. But like, I think from myself and Eden's perspective, we kind of people that are always going to want to be busy and we're going to want to have something to do. But yeah, look, without a doubt, like that work-life balance, I would say in the last 6 months, we've started to really get it working quite nicely. But that has come by the business having to grow to a certain point before it can, whereas I couldn't have done that a year ago at all, because I had to be on the ground all the time, whereas it's grown slightly enough that we can, again, outsource a little bit of it. So that gives me a bit more free time. So
how many properties have you guys look after at the moment?
We'd be on 25 now. It's growing pretty quickly. We've seen a pretty big boom in the last 6 months where we've taken on quite a bit. But again, we probably could have been at a slightly higher number, but we just took it down a notch. To me, the business, it's good. It's all well and good that the business grows, but it's got to grow at the right speed, at the right time. And I could probably have 30 odd properties under the belt, but if I don't have the capability to keep them and service them as well as we would be with just the 20 or 25.
Yeah,
it's growing the business at the right. That's for me anyway. Like, I'd rather just grow it steadily and keep up that standard.
Well, I think that's one of the benefits of coming from the background of real estate and seeing what it looks like on the other side. So seeing the rent roll of 300 properties and what not to do. So great, have 300 properties. That's fantastic. I'm sure that's a lot of money. Seeing the downside of that. So that's probably a good thing to see.
It is. Look, I think there's going to be a tipping point for it in any business, really. Yes. But for me, as soon as we go from, let's say, from like 20 to 50 properties, all of a sudden we're going to be looking at, are we going to be really generating the same amount of income or a little bit more for maybe having 9 staff on board? So it's all those little things that I think about. Like, so I think there's a balancing act where you got to find that quality of life and that work-life balance, for sure.
I think it's just being intentional. Like, you could grow. You could have, as you said, you could have 9 staff, 20 staff, whatever. That's fantastic. You could, but doesn't mean you should. It's
exactly right. Like, and I think it's also nowadays and look, I don't know, this is just me. This is how I think anyway. It's that perception that people want to have, that they are successful.
Yeah.
And people will go, oh, how many staff do you have? Oh, I have 10 working for me. Oh, you must be doing really well. But mate, you got how much in salary that you got to cover every week. And that's, to me, that's what I like about my business. I don't have an overhead. Like when COVID hits, but I don't have an overhead. I'm not paying anyone. I had subcontract all the rest of it. So I just had to make sure my mortgages were covered. That's pretty much it. And obviously it doesn't help the owners either. But from that perspective, if I had overheads, I probably would have folded, I reckon, business in COVID, 100%.
It's something that I'm seeing more and more, and your business is the prime example of having minimal expenses. So the traditional business, and obviously this is what Airbnb and the Uber and everything's brought to the forefront of that traditional business of having a warehouse or having office space or having frontage, whatever it is, having multiple staff, big overheads, big expenses with a lot of risk that a lot of people, obviously Australia's been less affected in COVID than others, but still there's that stress that comes with having those big overheads. Whereas, you take businesses like yours where, you don't have rent, you said you don't have staff, you don't have a warehouse, you don't have stock that you need to withhold. All these internet-based businesses, these e-com businesses that are just changing it completely.
Oh, they're changing everything. And I think it's very good. Like we've had opportunity to potentially look at growing and expanding into other fields within the industry. But I suppose it's also leaving a comfort zone of knowing that what we're doing is working, but then taking that risk and like, maybe do we get a space? But then it's like, for me, it's just, you've got to weigh that up before I dive into it. And it's not necessarily always all about money, but you want to have that comfort of, I suppose, that life balance for me is a big part for sure.
Yeah. What have you guys done to make it a little bit different? Like looking on your website, you've got, obviously there's the property management, but then all those other services that you do. I'm not sure if your competitors do that in terms of the social media side and the linen and the equipment.
Look, so I suppose it's a point of difference for us is that we just try and do something slightly different. Look, I'm not really too concerned. I don't really dive into my competitors and what they're doing. I like to just make sure what we do is on point and like we're hitting the mark. And it's all changed. Like when we've added services, we've taken services away. This has worked, that hasn't worked, which that's something I've liked about the business. You can just try things, man. And like if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Nothing's ever really set in stone on it. So we try things. If things work, brilliant. We offer services. We generally put it out and we don't really charge or anything like that for that, but we like reaching out to local community businesses too that are within our holiday bubble, whatever it is, like makeup artists, caterers, all that kind of stuff, and just advertise them on our website. I see that as beneficial for us. So the more information we can give our clients and our guests, the better off their stay is going to be for us anyway.
I guess the final thing I wanted to touch on was from your experience, the advice for anyone wanting to rent a property on Airbnb, whether it's they just want to do it themselves or use someone like you. What are well, obviously there's a lot of benefits, but some of the downsides that come with doing that, of renting your own property?
Look, I suppose if you're talking about, I suppose there's two different types of properties that you get. Is you get your own occupying property where owners still live in it, but they want to vacate for the weekend and then rent it out for the weekend, or there's that full-time rental. Obviously, the latter, being a full-time rental, is a lot easier. The benefit, I suppose, on having us, like it is, obviously, if you're interstate or you're in Melbourne, it's a kind of a no-brainer to have that person on the ground and making sure that it is good and everything's running smoothly. And I just think that's obviously the biggest part of what we do, is just adding a bit of a comfort level to people that are interstate. For the second, if you live in the property and you're wanting to do it, look, it's great. It can generate some fantastic income. It does, though, however, it is tricky, especially from our side of it, for managing those types of properties, because owners will pretty much only want to leave on the Friday and they want to get back on the Sunday. So that means we have to get our cleaners in Friday, get them in Sunday again. So there needs to be a lot more flexibility with those types of properties and those owners, but it can work, but it probably is not as smooth and as easy flowing as if it was just a full-time sort of thing.
Is there any common myths or the common questions that people ask you about Airbnb, of what they can and can't do? Or
Look, it's a lot harder than it looks. That would
Okay.
probably be the biggest myth, I would say. It does cost money too. It's not something that, if you want to continually be good, like I look at our properties as a business. So those properties need to maintain a standard throughout the year in, year out, really. So it's not just easy money coming in. You need to maintain your property. You need to change your linen every 6 months or so, depending on how busy you've been. So there's still expenses that are incorporated around it. And if the owner is willing to just stay on top of those maintenance issues and cleaning your carpets every now and again, then I reckon the sky's kind of the limit. But you do see those properties that they don't maintain it and it sags off and it gets looking a little bit tired, for lack of a better word. And then you'll just start seeing your numbers and your reviews and everything else just starts fizzling away.
I think that's a really good point, that thinking of it like a business rather than just thinking of an easy money maker.
100%. Yeah, it is. It is a business. And I think that's where it's changing. Where it used to be, probably back in the day, you could own a holiday rental in one of these coastal towns and it was just a little bit of extra income for a place that you're wanting to use. But now it's the other way around. It's like my owners, it's generating a good enough income. They ask if it's okay that they come and use their own place. It's like,
yeah,
it's yours, you do what you want. But yeah, like otherwise they would rather have the money. So that it is that frame of mind of being a business for sure.
So besides a few of those things you just mentioned of like cleaning the carpets, changing the linen, is there any kind of major like wow factors that when you first go into a property, you say, all right, this is the first things we're going to do. Like these are non-negotiables that you must.
Yeah, mate, probably the biggest one, and I could not stress this enough, is cleanliness. Cleanliness is key. That's probably our biggest point of difference. You can put a $300 gift basket on arrival for someone, but if it's dirty, they will ignore that. So cleanliness is key, 100%. That would be the biggest thing for us. That's what we spend most of our time on. And then just the rest of it's actually just keep it very simple, keeping it basic. Don't try and overdo it. Just really keep it simple, minimalistic. But again, I suppose everyone has slightly different taste in what they want to do. But for us, it's very, you'll look at most of our places, it's all pretty much just white and a bit of pop of that and green pot plant or whatever it is. But yeah, just keep it very minimalistic from our side. I think it works really well. And your photography is a massive key thing too, man. You got to get a good photographer in for sure.
Yeah, that was the one I first thought of, was that photography of what makes someone stop scrolling when they're going through Airbnb.
Exactly. It's photos. Yeah, 100%. Hit the nail on the head. Like I always try and find a property. I like properties with a slight points of difference, just anything, whatever it may be. Whether it's small ocean views and you've seen a lot of it now. Probably Tasmania is the forefront for it. People are getting very clever with what they're converting into little Airbnbs. It's awesome. Like we saw someone's created like a little floating sauna somewhere down in Tassie. It's unreal. It's unreal what people are doing. People are so clever. It's awesome.
What's the one you've got at the moment? Is it the hangar?
Yeah, the hangar. Yeah. It's so clever how Lone has done that. She's converted, I think it was a garage originally, and they're close to the airport, and what she's done and how she styled it. And yeah, she's done a really great job. She's awesome. She's done a fantastic little thing. And that place is, that's another good little way to look at it, is it's on site too. So she lives there on the back of it. So it's great. It generates an income. It pays your mortgage.
Yeah.
Why not?
Any other tips for people that if they're wanting to list their place or get started on Airbnb that you would suggest?
Don't rush it. Don't panic if, like, a lot of people will list their space and it's becoming a very competitive market. There's a lot of people that are doing it. Don't panic if it takes a couple of weeks to get a booking or anything like that. But also just do your research locally in your area and make sure that you understand pricing. Don't underprice it. Don't underprice your property would be a big one, because potentially, look, you can always lower your rate. You don't want to get someone in at a cheap rate. It's that, yeah, but just don't panic. Take your time. Don't stress. It will come. But yeah.
And what have you seen over the last, what's it been now? It's almost bang on 12 months with when COVID started, but have you seen it affect it much?
Only when to be honest, I think we were fairly lucky. We maybe dodged a bullet a little bit, but it was only when that first initial COVID thing happened, where everyone was like mad rushing to get all the toilet paper and all that kind of stuff. Everyone was like canceling bookings, and No one knew anything what was really going to be happening. And you see, that's another little thing. Like, these are the points of difference that I like about Airbnb, because people lost so much money as hosts over that. They actually offered a contribution to hosts. So you actually still recouped some of the money that we lost. So it was actually So that's a nice little point. That's another thing. Like, it's a very nice community within Airbnb. So my thumbs up to them. That was great.
And on top of that, do you get much support from them in terms of?
Yeah, look, I suppose it's like any one of those sort of bigger companies. But yeah, look, I can't fault them. Hey, they haven't missed a beat. We lucky enough that, touch wood, we haven't had anything really major go wrong. But yeah, there's a good community. Even if you have any questions or anything like that, there's forums and, that hosting community on Airbnb, and you can pretty much find any question, any answer you want just through those forums. But yeah, to get in, look, obviously through COVID, they were a little bit harder because everyone was just trying to get in touch with them and recouping money and all the rest of it. But generally, they'll get back to you within the day if you have any issues. So it's good.
And I guess in final points, some of the benefits, maybe other than what we've mentioned already, but some of the benefits of using your services as the business, as opposed to people trying to do it themselves.
Look, I suppose it's like anything. Look, I don't want to say that we're amazing or anything like that, but like,
you're allowed to. It's okay. This is your chance to say that.
Give it a bit of a nudge.
Yeah.
Look, mate, I think for us, the biggest benefit of using us is just knowing that your property is going to be in safe hands, and that we all about quality, not quantity. And that's a big thing that we push down tell our owners, is that we don't just take anyone in your property, because you do get those bad guests, I guess, essentially, that people will have their bucks parties or whatever it is. And that's where we really have a thorough screening process for our guests, and that we make sure that we're getting the right person in the door, because it is essentially it's probably your biggest investment that people will ever own. So you need to make sure that you look after it properly. And that's where I think we do, within reason, we do as much as we can to eliminate as much of those risks, to make sure that your property is looked after as well as it can be.
I think that was when we were first chatting about this. I think that was a really interesting point of difference. You were saying that you would go around to the properties and take the bins out if it's like an interstate, like something so simple, but you don't think about that. If you didn't rent that property, if that wasn't rented for 2 weeks, who takes the bins out? And
exactly,
I think you said it from one, obviously taking the bins out if there's rubbish, but two, making sure that people know that someone's there. It's not just a vacant property. I think that's a really
100%
big one.
Yeah, it's 100%, man. It's a big thing. Like, it doesn't take long for people to realize that your property is potentially going to be holiday rented, all that kind of stuff. So it's just making sure that there's a familiar face always around. Like, a minimum would be at a property once a week, bare minimum. Those are just, and it might not be me. That's me potentially being there once a week, whereas my manager will probably be there once a week too, as well as the cleaner potentially once a week. So there's 3 visits within a week anyway at your property without having a booking. Yeah, it's just looking after it and doing as good a job as we can, make sure that it's looked after well.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks Heath for taking time to be on the podcast.
No worries.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. As you would have heard, Craig only scratched the surface throughout this interview when it comes to things you need to know about running your own successful Airbnb property. So if you have any questions at all for Craig or myself, be sure to message them through on Instagram, and I might do a follow-up interview or maybe a Q&A with Craig on Instagram or something like that, just to answer some of the other questions, because it's something that I know a lot of people have questions about, and it's something that I have conversations with my clients about all the time, of wanting to start their own Airbnb, or how could they potentially earn some extra money on the side. And as you heard from Craig's story, it's such an awesome opportunity that we have to maybe increase that income and maybe put that money towards saving for renovations, or, as Craig and Eden did, purchasing their second property. While you're there on Instagram, be sure to check out Howzit Management Instagram page, and for anyone that's looking for an awesome place to stay on the north coast of New South Wales, be sure to check out Cabot Cottage. If not to rent out, definitely just for some inspiration. It's such a cool place they have there, and what they've done styling wise is incredible. So thanks again for listening to today's episode, and be sure to check in next week for another episode of the More Than Money podcast.
If you've enjoyed this episode of More Than Money, make sure that you subscribe to keep up to date with all of the latest episodes. And feel free to like, comment, and share with a friend.